Hi, this is Peter Teuscher. I'm here with Toby Demker. Thanks for joining us for another podcast. We usually just like to pick a topic and see where the conversation takes us. And we're looking to talk about topics that get people thinking, inspire, and hopefully create positive change. What do you think about that, Toby?
I think we're all ready for some positive change. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm all for
absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. So for we haven't been we haven't had a conversation for a while. We've been so busy with other things. So for anybody who actually follows our work and was wondering what happened to us, it was just really trying to get schedules aligned and have this conversation. And and I'm fresh off the plane from the Middle East, so. I'll try not to let the jet lag slow me down at all today. So, how
Yeah,
about you, Toby? How
perfect.
are you doing?
I'm good. Similar to you, it's been, as you said, it's been a lot going on, but it's fun. It's you get a lot of stuff done. Lots of interesting topics, lots of interesting people. So yeah, it's been busy, but I'm in a very good state. So
Fantastic. So, hopefully, we can bring that energy into our conversation today. And today's my turn to have a topic. And what I wanted to talk about today was sort of navigating information. So, um, we have there's so much input that we have, and I notice this especially as a coach when people are trying to figure out what they want to do with life. So they've got all this inner stuff going on, sorting through the various impulses and thoughts and things that they have going on internally, and then plus there's all the external impulses. Just in terms of your own personal choices, trying to navigate all of that, and then there's within a workplace or within your family or whatever, there you'll get. You've got kids that'll fight, and you're trying to sort out who's telling me what. Where's the truth in it, and then you and I both, when we do trainings and we hear, I had a workshop last week, and you hear these stories of these really genuine, sincere managers who really want to do. They want to be good at their job. They want to. They get all these ideas from these workshops we're doing. They want to implement them, but they're as Simon Sinek does a great talk on this about how everything breaks in the middle. And he talks about how
mm,
that's the worst role to have. Is that, well, he doesn't say it's the worst, but he it's the hardest role, where you've got the experts, the people that report to you as a manager, and then you've got the people you report to, and so the pressure comes from the top down and from the bottom up, and you're trying to sort it all out.
mm,
So how do we sort through all of that noise and all that information to figure out what the right path is, what the right choices are, what's true, what's not, and even in our media landscape, there's just the things have changed so much over the years, and we can get into that in a little more detail. So I think that's kind of what my topic, sort of the headline encompasses, and
mm.
I'm interested to see your thoughts and what kind of things you inspire me to say today.
Yeah, well, vice versa. It's right. I mean, just by your introduction there gets me thinking about all like high and low different. There's so many aspects of this, but where I guess my starting point is, and it's something that is kind of related to a workshop that I was on, or a training that I was on the other week with. They were experts, so it's a bunch of experts. They are not necessarily sort of the leaders in a from a positional point of view, that they're experts and they need to increase their influencing skills within the organization, right? So we talked a lot about that how do you first calibrating your own kind of compass. So what's important for you, what are your, and where it comes to your topic here, what are your facts, what are the facts that you are seeing, that you see take as the truth, kind of thing. But then, so that's one picture, but then it's really important also to calibrate, to sort of mutually calibrate. So what's your compass saying? So when you're dealing with someone else, what are the facts or the principles or the energy or whatever, but especially the facts here. What's your story? What do you see as the facts? Because that can be really, really different, right? And that's very often where you have different kind of conflicts. So how do you navigate that? I mean, in terms of navigating, how do you make sure that we're navigating the compass to go in the same direction and actually understanding what direction your compass is directing you in, as well as the other person?
Yeah,
Right?
I
So
think.
there's a lot of aspects at once there.
Yeah, I think the compass is a really good one, a good metaphor for that, because following your inner compass, I think to do, there's a lot of things, mindfulness and so on, that you can do in order to clear your mind and try and get straight on things. But I think the first thing, is not jumping to conclusions and not and checking your biases and so on. And I think I think there's a recognizing when your own state, and because we become very, look, I'm a little tired today. It makes you, I know that, when I'm tired, sometimes I can be irritable, and so when you recognize your state and you recognize that the way you're receiving information is not the way it's trying to be sent to you, right? We interpret things and so on. And I think actually the first thing is having a level of awareness, right? About what's going on internally, what's the information filtering through, right? So I think for sure recognizing your own state and recognizing that you're only seeing one piece of the big picture is probably a good way to begin from, and then be curious about what other pieces you're not seeing.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot about, I think, asking questions. As I say, being curious. So we all know that the two stories can be true at the same time. So, which is kind of, maybe that's a difficult kind of aspect to deal with, but I think we see that in a lot of different occasions, that I have one story, you have one story. They might be different, but they might still both be true. Right. So how can we deal with that kind of complexity of seeing that, okay, you have some information, I have some information, they don't necessarily overlap, but we're going in, we're seeing, well, we're heading in the same direction. So navigating that and asking questions, well, what is it that you're seeing? Well, this is what I'm seeing, but being very curious about what could be happening from your point of view. And I mean, we can take that in a interpersonal kind of state where you deal with it, having chats with your friends or your colleagues or your partner or whatever. But I mean, we can put that on a geopolitical level as well. So, I mean, the U.S.-China relationship. Okay, so what are you seeing? What am I seeing? Oh man.
Yeah, well, you can take it on. It's so funny that personal relationships and geopolitics, they have things in common, right? So, people's feelings get hurt. People have egos. They have pride and all these different things. And there's miscommunication. There's interpretation of and there's cultural things that get in the way. So yeah, I think there's recognizing the limits of communication. This is one of the first things that I do when I'm doing a workshop on communication, is we do the send and receiver model, right? So it looks very simple, right? I've got this idea, I formulate a message, I articulate it verbally, and the other person receives it, and I figure job done, right? And then I get into, okay, what could get in the way, right? And then you've got all the from the iceberg, all the stuff below the surface, the beliefs, the emotions, and all the different other things. So I think when you're trying to sort through information and trying to navigate all of that, it's just important to know that there's you can only see a portion. You are probably overlooking something, or maybe you're misinterpreting something. There's constraints to all of that. And I think recognizing those things is an important piece of just trying to navigate the details. So, and I think also, and you can put that in any context, right? And it's hard to do. It's especially in relationship where emotions are involved, or in the workplace, when maybe you're under stress or pressure. It's hard to sort of take the moment to step back and realize, okay, what's my state right now? What's the intention of the person? They're not trying to attack me, or they're not trying to undermine me, or and the same goes in personal relationships, right? So when you receive a message and it does something to you emotionally, it's super helpful if you want to get down to the bottom of what it's really all about, because the words have limits, but also a lot of people aren't great communicators, and they will package something in a way that maybe they don't want to offend you, or they're being cautious about the way they're formulating it. So yeah, I think all of those things play such a role in making communication more difficult, and making it more difficult to navigate the where the truth lies. And it's one thing I really enjoy. I learned to, well, it was a real adjustment, but I really learned to appreciate the German culture of directness. In the beginning, there were times when I first got to Germany where I was like, well, that was kind of rude, because people were so direct, but they didn't mean it in a rude way or a mean way. It was just the culture is to, say what you think, not in every context, but with limits. And now I really appreciate that. In most times, people give it to me straight, and they'll tell me what they think. I never have to second guess. So, yeah. So I think it's not just about so there's the communication piece for sure. And there's the part about recognizing, what's going on in you that could be causing you to have a distorted view of the world, right? So there's all those things. And then there's checking your beliefs and recognizing that you have some biases, right? I think empathy also plays a role, right? So, when you're trying to, like, I had this conversation with, we brought up geopolitics, and, the gentleman who's leading the Russian nation at the moment. Anyway, he just, when people are villainized, and look, some bad things are happening, so that may be rightly so. But the thing is to understand what the motivation behind something. It's just too easy to say, well, that person's evil, or they're a bad person. There's probably an intention there. There's probably a strategy there. And you'll be better off, even if it's a very bad or negative strategy, you'll be better off to understand what that person actually is trying to get. Especially if you want to negotiate, or you want to try or you really need to find a win-win, or some kind of a solution, right? So to just go put someone in a box and say, well, they're bad and I'm in the right, that's not going to bring you together, and the conflict's going to remain. So those are times when it's really important to sort out the information that's coming in, but also your own inner responses to that information, right?
Yeah, I mean, even as I draw parallels with interpersonal kind of just dialogue and geopolitics. It's really what's your intent, and what are you reacting to? So when you're talking about navigating information, that sounds like a very proactive kind of thing to do. So if we're going to navigate, first of all, we want to set out the direction, and the information. Then we want to utilize information to find a direction, or find an intent perhaps for what we want to do with it. So that takes a lot of thought process to think about, stop and think, what am I seeing, what are others seeing? So just that statement, for me, it sounds very constructive, kind of creative. But what usually happens, and I think even as I said, in a partnership or in a geopolitical conflict, that we're not navigating, no, we're just reacting. So we're reacting to whatever beliefs or whatever is being thrown at us, and well, I have to do something. But it's awareness, there's no intent, there's no constructiveness, there's no direction in that. And we all know that this happens to us all the time, with amygdala hijack and a lot of other actually, anatomical aspects of what happens to our brain. So just the statement of navigating information, so taking it proactively, thinking about what I'm seeing, what I'm not seeing, listening to what other, and then setting out the direction for it. It's easy to talk about, let's navigate our information, but it takes a real effort, doesn't it? Right?
It totally does. And I'm learning this in dealing with kids, where so my partner Sarah, she was saying how there will be something with her daughter where I'll take it at face value, and then afterwards she's just trying to manipulate you to do this or whatever, and so that's really interesting because, and I don't think that kids do it intentionally. They have their strategies, and I don't think there's any bad intentions behind it. But it's interesting to read between the lines sometimes and understand. What's really at play. People have agendas, right? Sometimes they have agendas, and they have, and you see this in codependent relationships. You see this in when people are being passive aggressive, right? And so there's so much to navigate, and especially because so much of language is, nonverbal, right? And trying to pick up on those cues adds a whole another level of complexity to it. So. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, and so I think I try not to second guess people's intentions. I can't remember who said it, or I've heard it said a few times that it's always best to assume good intentions, right? And some people think that's naive or whatever. I think I have a pretty good intuition for when there's danger, when I shouldn't trust someone. But I think for the most part, unless you've got this real gut feeling that says, oh, there's something wrong here, I think assuming people have good intentions, right? And I think that's a really good place to start from. And then you can then you're taking away some of your assumptions, and you're able to take in that information at face value. I think that's a really good habit to get into.
Yeah, and it's all about a balance, right? I mean, if we blindly trust everybody that is around us and that everybody has good intention, I'm saying blindly trust. I mean, it's a big risk that you're going to be taken advantage of, that you're going to be have some bad experiences. But on the other hand, being what you would call that, closed, not trusting anyone, and saying that, yeah, well, if I'm going to trust you, you have to earn it, right? That's a pretty tough starting point. So striking a balance there of reason, and yeah, we need to take care of ourselves, but we also need to take care of others and our relations. So I think it's difficult to say in black and white what's working, but we really need to balance out these kind of energies.
No, I agree with you. I think there's the openness, and again, the big five character traits that we have. The openness is one, and we have varying degrees of it. Some are just more open than others. So there's I'm not trying to tell people you've got to change your character. Just like some people are more introverted, some are more extroverted. But I think that trying to be how you see the world is important in terms of how you interpret the information that's in front of you. There's the Einstein quote about the most important question we have to ask is, do we live in a friendly or hostile universe? And I think that's philosophically, like that's a really important foundational belief. To believe that we live in a friendly universe, I think, is way more positive. And I think it goes back to this, not assuming bad intentions, like always assuming good intention. I think is ties nicely into that. But that said, it's hard to sort of figure out where what's behind information. Like if you, for example, the news has changed a lot in 20 years because of the digital age, right? The people who, well, there's been a lot of consolidation in the companies that own the newspapers. There's also state-owned newspapers who, in democratic countries, we hope they're impartial. Everybody's got some bias. But then you've got people who sell the news who are competing with, clickbait and so on. And so, there's I don't know if you've noticed it, but I've noticed the trend to sensationalism, people gravitating to certain types of stories, having a lot of experts on rather than having, someone just going, here's the facts of what happened, and letting people kind of figure it out for themselves. So especially during COVID, where I was so glued to the news, I found it really made me kind of negative, right? And I think, and I recommend to people that, if you're feeling really nihilistic, negative, frustrated, maybe take a step back so you can also see the good in the world, right? Because if you're inundated every day, like, there was a time when I was a kid that you didn't have a 24-hour news cycle, right? You didn't have CNN on 24 hours a day. And so how do we navigate that? And I was visiting with a good friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and we got into a whole bunch of sort of current events topics. And and he had certain views because of the information he had. I have my views, but he was willing to have the conversation, and it was really great. And so, how do we come to such differing views on certain things, right? And some of it's just my opinion, but a lot of it's the source of where's the source of information coming from, and so. And so that I think is really, it's become so hard. It's so much work for people, whether they're trying to figure out what's actually good for me to eat. How do I sort through all the information on labels? It takes so much work. Just like, how do I sort through all the information that's coming? So, I mean, for me, I have a list of journalists that I follow that they've won prizes like Pulitzer Prize or something, and they've got a good track record of really nailing the big stories, and then always kind of turning out to be right in the end, and so I've made for myself a diverse list of journalists, and that's a lot of work if you're not interested in current events or geopolitics. I am a little bit. So I have a list, and they have differing views, but I find through those different sources of information, who I all believe to be credible and well intended, I find somewhere there I find the where the truth of it is, and so when I take that and I take it into a workplace situation, you pick out the people that are pretty level-headed most of the time, pretty objective, and have a good perspective on things. And you try and get the story from them, right? Or you have kids. What do you do with your family when it's like there's some kind of a dispute, and you sit everybody down and you try and navigate, what really happened here? What do you do with your family?
Oh, I think it's difficult when the emotional aspect comes in, because that's where we go into that trap where our emotions kind of take charge, and we just react to their emotions rather than looking at sort of analyzing the facts or the sequences of things. But it's really about cooling down, I think, and then of course, just trying to have constructive conversations. But that's like any kind of conflict resolution, I think, when you're dealing with. But then sometimes I think it can be. Well, there's two aspects of it when it comes to family. It can be more difficult because you're so close to each other. So then there's more emotions in play, so to say. But the other hand, you need to get it right because you're family. So there's no, you can be more forgiving in that sense. That we have a big conflict now, but we need to get through this, right? So and that's that's kind of family. So it's two aspects of it really that
Yeah.
makes it difficult.
Okay.
Mm, mm,
So that's some of the external inputs and trying to figure that out. And then the other piece that I was talking about at the beginning, which is a big reason people come for coaching, is how do I navigate? I've got these choices, right? I've got I've got different, I've got different ideas, and I don't
mm,
know what. So I guess navigating all of that information, I think, is a challenge a lot of people face, right? Whether they're making choices about their health, their career, their relationships. And relationships is one where you've got tons of people who are experts on relationships. So
mm,
and none of them are going to give you perfect advice.
mm,
So when you're trying to like think about something simple like you do a lot of running, right? So if you're trying to figure out what is the best shoe to buy, right? And you're going to get like how many different brands telling you all
oh
the reasons
God.
why theirs is the best, right? So it's kind of like that. How do you
Yeah,
navigate that information? What do you do?
yeah. I was just actually thinking about a similar example. I mean, we were talking about the complexity of things and looking at, it should be such a simple thing of, okay, so how do I lose weight? A lot of people want to lose weight. And there are millions of different theories and ideas of what is the best way to do it, right?
Hmm.
And what is sustainable, what's not sustainable. So, I mean, we can have so much knowledge about stuff, but it doesn't make us any smarter necessarily, right? There's just navigating and breaking that down that information to see what works for you. No, but I think, but to answer your question, I think it's more about, well, you can be inspired by information. You can get ideas about information. You can get facts and smartness about information, but then yeah, how do you apply it, and what works with you? What kind of experience have you had? So it's about creating that own story. This works for me. Try that doesn't work for me. So it's about I think it's actually really a balance of trusting your experience and being open to what you don't know, right? And I think that's a really, really and it kind of coaching session for sure. What don't you know, and what is it that you don't know that you would need to know, kind of thing, right?
Hmm.
So bringing
Yeah.
up that yeah, unconscious competence that you need.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
I think Donald Rumsfeld said something about the known knowns and the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. And like he had these four quadrants. So that reminded me just a little bit of that. But I think
Mm.
that's a big one to understand. Know where your blind spots are, and recognize the things that trigger your emotions, so that distorts your view of things. I think that's a really important one. I always like to go back to systemic principles, right? So when we see things as a system, that it's a feedback loop. So you look at what feedback it's giving you, but you try and look at the whole thing. You try and zoom into you make distinctions in the different parts that you can recognize. You zoom in or zoom out, or you change perspective, and then you recognize the relationship between those. So for those are not, I know you know all this stuff, but it's understanding systemic principles. And I think that's a really good way to approach sort of how do you get to the bottom of things, or how do you sort out different bits of information, because it just when you force yourself to look at things from different perspectives, it gives you a whole new view of things. It gives you a
Mm.
whole it gives you a fuller picture, right? And then when you see the relationship between how things fit together, whether it's situations, you have a situation and you made an assumption about someone's behavior, and then you get another piece of information about what's affecting that person. Then all of a sudden there's another piece to the puzzle, right? So
Mm.
someone's having trouble at home, or there's been a death in the family or whatever, and you all of a sudden aren't like, wow, he's being a real idiot today. No, you start to recognize that there are a lot of other things at play. I think that the systemic approach is a really important one. And I think, for people trying to coaching is a great thing when you're trying to sort it out and get clarity, right? And we have lots of tools for that kind of stuff. But I think, being able to take a step back, because when you're sort of in the thick of things and you're immersed, it's really different. It's difficult to get clarity. That's why they talk about you can't see the forest for the trees, right? Because you're so in the thick of it. I think those are some really important things, and taking the emotion out of it, as we talked about earlier. Not letting those emotions distort your view of the facts and the information is really important.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, a lot of this comes back actually, and sometimes we forget about the systemic principles and that, but actually really try to implement this in a lot of the aspects of your life, to say it comes naturally to you. I think that's really helpful when it comes to sorting out navigation, seeing patterns, trying to see how things connect together, and zooming in, zooming out, as you're saying, to realize that when you're stuck and looking at the details, to okay, how can I see the big picture of things, and sort of going in and out. I think that's really good techniques, kind of when it comes to navigating in information. But it takes training and practice to do it. Right?
Absolutely, everything takes practice, and that's why I always go back to sort of the godfather of systems thinking. I guess Peter Senge. He wrote the Fifth Discipline, which is all about systems thinking, and I think I read that book back in the early '90s. So it's been a long time, but but he talks about systems as it's a feedback loop, right? It's a in a closed system it's a little simpler, but a lot of these things are just the feedback you're getting from a system gives you the clues to and helps you fill in the gaps in terms of the information that you're missing, and I think that's a really helpful and healthy way to look at it.
But then, then extending these loops, so it's not just a single loop, but then maybe a second or a third, or maybe they're talking about a fourth kind of feedback loop now as well, right?
Yeah, maybe the loop is not a helpful way to talk about it, but there's feedback that you're getting from the system, right? The system gives you feedback, and that's the clues to help fill in, and the way you see, it's interesting because a lot of people seeing is believing, and so they figure I've seen something, and so I know what I trust it because I can see it. But we the chances that we're seeing reality are zero. Donald Hoffman I can't remember which university he's from, but he's an American scientist, and he talks about the chances that we see reality are literally mathematically zero. But look, I mean, to bring it back to a more something we can work with a little more. The way we see things, it's processed by the reticular activating system. I hope I've got that terminology right in your brain. So you get what you see, the light that hits your eye. It's processed, it's broken down, and your brain actually takes out the bits that it needs and then puts it back together based on what you already know, right? So the thing is that you're constantly getting this feedback where you're deconstructing it and then putting it back together in a way that makes sense for you. And I think when you can remember that all that stuff is going on, then you're not so. I mean, I don't want to undermine people's confidence, but you're not so self-assured that you absolutely know what the truth is, right? So and that you absolutely saw things the way they are, because this is well known when you have eyewitnesses to things. You'll have 3 eyewitnesses and they all have a different story, or they'll have some things that are similar, but they'll have things that are different. And this is why you have experts as well that have completely opposing opinions, right? They're experts. They really know a lot about a certain field, and yet they disagree with each other. And clearly there's something different about the way they've interpreted the data. So So these are all important things to remember, to be humble and not to, when you're trying to navigate information, to recognize that, there's risk in everything, and you're going to try and get as close to the truth as you can, but there's no absolute truth.
Mm. Yeah. And exactly, you can totally be viewing at the same thing, and you can have the same kind of interest in mind, but there can be two, or it can be 3 or 4 different kind of truths to the situation, right? And like, I've talked a lot before with you about this 6 phases of globalization, that you can take very different narratives to looking at globalization, and many of them are serving the same kind of purpose, or serving the same kind of interest for the population. But if we look at the right populist approach and the left populist approach, it's kind of there they serve to protect us, and looking at the same issues, but it's 2 very, very different truths, and there's very different bad guys in the story.
Yeah, and this is the problem that I find with politics or these different ideologies, is they become dogmatic, and then you're not navigating the information. You've got an ideology, you've got a set of beliefs that are fixed, they don't change with new information. This has always been the criticism of religion. They can't evolve and change with the times. So people can't relate to them. Some people can't relate to them. So I think this is the problem when we get so captured by our own beliefs. It's hard to gather new information. It's hard to see. We filter out all these things because we see the world through the filter of our beliefs, and so it's important to be aware of that as you're trying to figure out what is the truth, where, how close can I get to it, and how can it help me in the decisions I'm trying to make.
Yeah, it's not an easy task, is it?
No, really difficult. It's really challenging, but it's really worth.
It's just interesting to be open to it, to understand, to really have. And of course, everybody knows this, but like, if we go about with things with a little bit more humbleness, that I don't have the whole picture. I don't have the whole story. So I would be interested to know what you see and understand what it is that I'm not seeing. Right? And it's a very different kind of attitude towards things.
And it's such an important piece of our whole learning journey, is because when we think we know, then we shut ourselves off from other options when we think we know. And it's the same problem that happens when. And it's so interesting because I mentioned that on the news now you have a lot more experts talking about things rather than, a journalist or, a news person reading the news. You have these experts, and what happens to people when they hear an expert, they will no longer stop thinking. They'll just take that opinion, depending on how much credibility that expert has with them, but they will just take that opinion and then they won't reconsider it. Well, the expert says so, I don't need to think about it anymore. And I think that's a problem. I think, like I said, the experts have multiple experts will have multiple opinions, and I think that's just one source of information. Maybe you can give that more weight than somebody who just has an opinion and is not informed. But I think these are all things that are really important, especially if we want to find the good in the world, if we want to make better choices in terms of the contribution we make or the effect that we have on the world or the people around us. I think I see it as a responsibility to take the time to navigate information and try and make sure that that you're informed enough to make good decisions. And then when it comes down to the whole piece of being happy, which that's a really important one for me, is helping people find more happiness in their life and their work and everything else. And I think that the information that you're getting and believing has a big role to play in that. And so that's also why it's worth making the effort to be self-aware, to recognize, to to help you see the world as clearly as possible, so that you can, because when you get too negative, or you get or you're naive and you find you get yourself in trouble, I think all of those things lend to finding a more successful and happy life.
Mm. Yeah, for me, I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, in terms of seeing the world very clearly, I enjoy that part of seeing the world in ambiguity, I guess, or in haziness. But I do agree, and maybe this is what you're trying to say, actually, or maybe what you are saying, but I'm misinterpreting, is how can you take that, in that haziness or ambiguity, create clarity for yourself and what your own, and by
Yeah.
that sort of creating your own happiness, right?
Exactly. Finding clarity for yourself, because what's true for you might not be true for someone else. And if you adopt these all these informations, opinions from other people, if you're not living your own truth, so to speak, it's just like living your own values, right? People are allowed to have different opinions. They're allowed to have different values. But if you're living a life that is in conflict with your own, with a lot of those values and beliefs and thoughts that you're having, I think that's when, or the feelings that you're having, when it's like, when people, this is a very common thing for people who are depressed, right? They don't feel that their feelings are justified. Everything out here is fine, but I still don't feel good, and they feel almost ashamed to have those feelings, right? And so I think there's legitimacy in that, in what you're feeling, in the way you're seeing the world. There's legitimacy to that, as long as you don't try and force that on others. But as long as that way of thinking and believing isn't going to harm any other people, right? But the thing is, the way we've interpreted the world has such a big role in how we feel, what our place is, the choices we make, right? And this is why when someone look at two people, let's say two young men. One lives in a Western country with a upper middle class family, gets to go to university and so on. And then you have someone who lives in another part of the world where maybe they're poor and there's conflict. And the different ways those two people are going to see the world, because their experiences have molded that, right? Because the only things that they've seen have created that view of the world. And unless you, and the thing is, I've seen people I've talked to people who've really struggled in life and had difficult situations, and they still find ways to find optimism, because the way they've kind of navigated their life and information and the way they've interpreted that. They've done it in a way that still gives them they've made sense of it. Their whole sense-making apparatus has led them to conclusions that are benefiting them, but that haven't made them negatives and resentful and angry, right? And that's it's so much easier to fall into that. I'm going to choose that to be angry about, and so we tend to, I don't want to say lazy, but we tend to go to the next easiest answer, rather than trying to take the systemic approach and look for different possibilities that could be true.
Yeah. And actually, you just made me realize something really interesting just happened literally like an hour ago before we started here. And it's highlighting the importance to sensing the information that you have within. And because my son came home and he was lying there a bit tired. It's Friday, end of the week, so he was a bit tired. And I said, "Are you a bit grumpy?" And he was like, "I don't know." Okay, well, let's find out. So I just where are you feeling it? So he was playing with his iPad, so he took that away and said, "Well, yeah." And then, "No, I think I'm good." "Well, you seem a bit grumpy. Are you okay?" yeah, I am okay. Like, and he just thought about it and he felt that for a little bit. No, I'm good. He was just a bit tired,
Yeah.
and just that simple thing, creating a little bit of clarity. Because he said, I'm not sure what's going on, but then okay, no, I'm actually good. I choose to just do this, and then fine. But it was just it really just stood out to me now that's it. It's making sense of the information that you have within, and this is
Mm.
your emotions that are speaking. So what are they doing to you, and how do you then choose to react and navigate with it, right?
Mm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's important to remember that feelings are communication. It's also a form of information, right? People, we know that when you hit your toe somewhere and there's pain shoots up your leg, that's the your body communicating that something's gone wrong there. But we don't tend to see the same when we're feeling emotionally, in a negative way. We don't always tend to make that connection and recognize, well, actually, there's something in me that's trying to tell me something, right? And so that's, I think, sorting through and navigating sort of all of our internal information that's coming to us from our, you can call it your emotional guidance system, I guess. That I think that you're right. That's totally important, and it's great that you're guiding your son that way at an early age, because I think a lot of us are, well, maybe not the newer generations, but I kind of felt like, no, you can't trust your feelings. There was a lot of kind of invalidating the things that you feel, and as valid information. I think or at least I interpreted it that way when I was younger. And fortunately, I've through all the work that we've been doing and I've done in the past, it's really helped me take a lot of that more seriously and help others to navigate that whole source of information, the inner source, so. Cool.
Yeah, well, I guess that's kind of what we do in our profession to
Yeah.
a large extent, at least, right? It's trying to make sense and just noticing the information that we do have within and what's that telling us, and then finding a way to navigate through this. So yeah. So actually, maybe all this time, this conversation was about coaching more like.
I guess, it's hard to coach yourself, but you can find ways to be more aware. And I think that's kind of a prerequisite, I think, for trying to see the world clearly and navigate the information that's around you, navigate the information that's coming from within you. I think is taking a lot of those steps to sort of clear out the clutter. So having a mindfulness practice, I'm a big fan of meditation, and I think whenever I work with someone and they're trying to figure out a really difficult choice to make, I always recommend that you take yourself out of the situation. If you can take a weekend away, like get out of all the distractions or all of the things that your routines, and completely remove yourself, and then when you come back, you'll hopefully have reset and see things through fresh eyes. Whether it's a day, a weekend, a couple of weeks, the bigger the choice you're making, the more time away is I find is helpful. And then all of a sudden it'll come to you. There'll be clarity there, and I'm a real big believer in that. So putting yourself in the right state.
I think we've talked about those, how the brain makes connections, and then we focus on something that it's creating those kind of connections and synapses, but then they get stuck in it. So we need that break too for it to create new connections, and then we can look at or sort of process the problem in a different way, or the learning. So yeah, that term sleep on it, that really, it actually means something.
Yeah, absolutely. So cool. I think we've kind of taken where I wanted to go with this topic today. We've covered, the news. I'm a big proponent in people sorting out, not just. I actually know a guy in Sweden who now he only has one source of news for everything, and so his view of the world is very predictable, based on and we've talked about sorting out your inner compass and sorting out communication and the interactions with other people. So I think we've covered a lot. I kind of feel like I rambled incoherently at a couple of spots because maybe it's jet lag. I don't know. Don't want to make excuses, but
No,
so
it's all very interesting stuff.
so. But I think we covered a lot. So
But I'm thinking, so what can you do now to get a break too, so you can consider your you don't have to tell everybody that's listening, but just putting your own ideas into practice now. How can you create some space so you can process those whatever kind of challenges that you might be facing?
Oh, that's an easy one. I've already planned. Well, I'm going to play basketball tonight, and sports. As you well know, getting active, getting into when you're in your body, you get out of your mind, and that's why yoga can be such a great practice. Is all of your attention goes on your body. But I find getting active, playing getting out and being very physical, playing a sport, really relieves a lot of stress. And even when I'm tired, I'll feel so much better after I've done it. So yeah, that's tonight I'm gonna go play with the team that I play with here, and got practice tonight. So I'm looking forward to that.
Cool.
So that's a really good one. I mean, usually, if I'm feeling a little bit stressed or irritated or whatever, I can go for a run, or I'll try and meditate. If you're not experienced in meditating, trying to meditate when you're really your head's has tons of thoughts and you're stressed or whatever, that's not the time to start trying to meditate. But fortunately, I've been doing it for a while, so for me, it's a really good one. Just breathing through it and then getting into a meditative state, that really helps me a lot too. But yeah, no, tonight I think it's going to rejuvenate me to go shoot a few hoops and get a good run in, and I know I'll be feeling better. And then it definitely lets a lot of that pent up kind of any kind of pent up negative energy. It helps me get it out. So yeah. What about you? Do you have something when you're trying to get clarity that you do?
Well, for me it's running.
Yeah,
that's it. That's my go-to thing. But also, actually, I notice more and more that I practice these small sprints of breathing. Just thinking about my breathing and utilize that in a way to sort of reset myself. But I'm going skiing. Actually, we have Easter holiday next week, so on Sunday
Nice.
I'm going skiing for a few days. So, that's going to be great.
Awesome. Yeah, getting out in nature is another really great one. I mean, I always come back to the same things. Get some time out in nature. That always helps to ground people, and being active. Those are all really, really good things to help clear your mind and get you back on track. So. And actually, one other thing that I recommend people sometimes is some form of journaling. I like to recommend The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. She wrote that book, I think 25 years ago, and it's helped so many people. But one of the at the beginning they start with morning pages, and it's just an exercise that you do every morning where you write for 30 minutes every day. Whether you have something to say or not, you just write as a habit, and it's amazing the kind of stuff, how cathartic that is, the amount of stuff that just comes out, and once it's out, then it's you no longer have it in here, and you feel better.
It's cool, actually.
Yeah, and sometimes through that whole writing process, you start, something clicks and you go, wow, I hadn't thought of that before. And so it's just it's about finding the right process for you. But that's another one. If you're not super athletic, or you don't want to go go the workout or the running route, just some journaling, some creative time is a really, really good one to clear the head a little bit as well. So yeah, those are a few tips for people. Good. Well, why don't we leave it there? I hope that despite me feeling less focused than I'd like to be, which, I'm not that great. I'm not that focused at the best of times, but yeah, my mind tends to go in different directions, which also has, its upsides, creatively. But anyway, so hopefully you've been able to pick out some of the nuggets in our conversation. And but yeah, it's I've missed our chats, so let's get back into a rhythm of doing these every 2 weeks.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's it. Mm-hmm.
All right. So for everyone listening, thanks again for joining us. And yeah, hopefully you got something great out of this. And we look forward to speaking to you on the next one. All right.
We do.
Take care.
Cheers.
Cheers.